Hey guys, it's Josh, and welcome back to the Not So Bad Bachelor Pad, your favorite podcast for learning how to balance between being a functional adult and a raging dumpster fire. And most days, we're all a bit of a dumpster fire. But speaking of dumpster fires, I don't know about you, but have you ever just met somebody who seems like they're so successful, they have it all together, they're disciplined, they're focused, successful, but their relationships are a hot mess? They're in charge of people or they run a company, and one wrong phone call or text from the wrong person will completely spiral their day. Well, hopefully this week, our guest joining us inside the Bachelor Pad, Anutza Bellissimo, can help shed some light on why those people who are the highest achievers have the hardest time maintaining or forming those relationships. Welcome to the show. How are you?
So good. Thank you, Joshua. I love the way you paint that picture of the most successful people. And it's such an interesting question, isn't it? It's like this strange phenomenon.
It really is. We have this idea of what a CEO is, what an entrepreneur is, and we almost strip their humanity away. We just let them be their title. And I was like, obviously, if you're a CEO of a successful business, you're successful in all aspects of your life. But in
Maybe.
in reality, that may not always be the case.
Right. Think about it. I mean, we have an allotted amount of energy, right? And if we are constantly pouring everything into one cup, if you think about it, the way we describe successful people, entrepreneurs, CEOs, any way you want to look at this, we can recognize that if someone is spending the majority of their time pouring into one cup, being their career, making money, optics, whatever you want to call this, and the other aspects are empty, right? Or half full, right? It's really easy to see why successful people would struggle in relationships because, first of all, they're typically known as high performers, right? They often excel because they've learned to operate under pressure. They push through discomfort. They do their best to stay in control. And those same strengths can become liabilities in relationships. We ask ourselves, well, how is that possible? Because emotional intimacy requires vulnerability, right? It requires flexibility and a willingness to be seen without achievement as a shield. And most of these individuals are using that level of achievement as a shield. And many high achievers equate their worth with performance. So when love feels uncertain, they try to fix it or optimize. And the connection, instead of allowing it to breathe and learn how to be, that can make these partners feel, I guess, managed instead of emotionally met or understood. Does that resonate?
No, it really does. So often we're tracking trends, numbers, data. However, emotions aren't as clean as some data points.
Hmm.
And that's all a relationship is, a violent cocktail of emotions, the highs, the lows, everything in between. So it's hard to predict those curves and to prepare around it.
Yeah, it's funny because the same qualities that make someone crush it, right, in their career can really trip them up in love because these high performers are used to controlling outcomes and pushing through these obstacles. But relationships don't work that way. There's no checklist for emotional intimacy. So when love, right, because what are you going to do here? But when love shows up, when we have this experience of breakdown in our relationship and it feels uncertain, we try to fix it or manage it. And then we end up making our partners really just feel like something else on the checklist instead of feeling understood.
I say this time and time again to a lot of my newer clients or my clients who are entering into new relationships, and that is nobody wants to feel like an obligation.
Yes, correct.
We get so used to setting schedules, coordinating schedules, trying to fit things in between doing tasks A, B, and Z that we will overcommit to things,
Hmm.
but not sound enthusiastic about it. And so once again, people just feel like it's a chore. It's an obligation. You're doing them a favor by gracing them with your time instead of
Right.
them feeling like they're actually being a partner.
It really does take tolerance, it takes time, it takes a certain level of availability to have a true emotional connection. This is not just check the box central. Yeah, gave her a kiss. Oh, yeah, had sex. Oh, yeah, got the grocery list. Oh, yeah, picked up the laundry. Like this to do list, it's really about making sure that your partner feels understood, seen, or heard.
And that's tough for everybody, not just high achievers, but your everyday people as well.
Can be.
So often I have this conversation with all of my girlfriends or even some of the guys. They're like, we're tired of just the same routine of, yeah, he shoots me a good morning text, maybe a good night text. Like it's a template. And then we just change who's receiving, or, we're just switching out the names of the template. And we don't do cookie cutter here. It's not really effective when you're trying to foster intimacy.
Right. It's true. But our conditioning shapes our patterns. And when we don't recognize or slow down enough to understand how our conditioning shapes our patterns, we make the same relationship over and over and over again until we get it, until one of those relationships tears us up or we're in crisis and we finally get the lesson that we're the problem in our relationship, not the partner that changes because the name changes and the face changes, but the patterns don't change until we recognize that we're the problem in the situation.
No, we get too comfortable and we just float to what feels familiar. But the thing with falling into familiarity is it didn't work the first time. It hasn't worked the third time. So why are we trying it the fifth, sixth, and whatever time we're on now?
That's a great question. And I think it's because people are not taught what do you do when you keep repeating the same patterns? How do you actually change that, right? Like it's not a real conversation that we have on an everyday basis. We're not taught these skills necessarily. We're taught so many things in school, but we're not taught how to regulate our nervous systems. We're not taught how to enhance our emotional intelligence. We're not taught how to assertively communicate ourselves. There's so many things that are so important to everyday life and our relationships. It's incredible.
Sorry, you're right. I think this has been a running conversation we've had for at least three out of
Wow.
the seasons we've had so far. Is I believe relationships would be so much more nourishing and we would have a higher percentage of healthy relationships and lower divorce rates if EQ was just as important as IQ is to our system. I mean, schools spend so much time, most of your life or your early adolescence
Yes.
is teaching you how to raise your IQ. It's teaching you scholastic academic value, but not teaching you how to be a functional or a good person. So I think
Right.
that's a little ironic in a sense.
It is. It is. And some people actually have that inherently. That's part of, I don't know, part of who they are because of their people pleasing skills. Not that this is a positive or negative trait. I call it neutral, but it's so. And some of us have it more than others. So we have a higher level of empathy or emotional intelligence due to our conditioning. And we recognize that not everyone was raised that way or was conditioned in the manner that creates that level of emotional intelligence within us. So that's where a lot of the conflict comes in, is when we don't take the time to recognize our values, our beliefs, and who we are as individuals and align that accordingly. We just throw shit at the wall and hope that it works. Oh, let's go with this guy. Let's check out that girl. Who's next? What's up? You know? And I mean, it's so counterproductive to our future self, first of all, because people don't take into consideration the effects a negative relationship can have on us.
No, that's big facts.
Whew.
And that actually kind of like, if you don't mind, I just want to like stay here in this little moment for a second. As long as I've been in this intimacy space, it hasn't hit me really until maybe the last 6 months that we talk about we fall into these familiar patterns, but we always make it seem so one-fold. But really, I think it's a multifold issue. It's the fact that a bad relationship really does create a cycle, but it's also recognizing that it's not just the person that's not working. Maybe it's the misalignment of values. Maybe it's the incompatibility between the two people. Yeah, all the people I date look and feel completely different, but at the core, they're kind of the same. We don't know really what to look for when we're trying to break free of this pattern.
Yes, because if you think about it, if you look at the complaint section of your relationships and you could take into consideration the complaints that you have at the end of the relationship, that you say, this person does this, that showed up in your last relationship. They're the same asshole that you broke up with. There's the,
It's true. I was
there's
like,
the
you haven't told a lie
characteristics
yet.
that you're saying they were just like this. So it's not them. It's that you're attracting these individuals that have these characteristics because they may have compensating like characteristics that you appreciate and enjoy, but you're overlooking the parts of them that you will hate in about 6 months. And
And I tell people that, go ahead.
yeah,
I was going to say, I tell people the biggest growth moments happen when you're uncomfortable. So you have to be uncomfortable in your relationship because like I said, you have to get out of your box and date somebody, meet somebody who is not your norm. However, I guess when you're feeling uncomfortable and it's not familiar, you don't really know what you're looking for. It's like the first time you drive somewhere and you're like, you're slower because you're like, did I miss my turn? Is this it? Like, do I keep going? There's so many new bits of stimulation also in this relationship that you might biff it a time or 2 before you actually hit your destination.
yeah. And that's where I keep coming back to is people are getting into relationships without recognizing the level of sometimes danger, but also the level of conflict that not only creates on the surface, but it creates conflict inside of them. And there's a psychological toll to choosing people and places and relationships that we have to work through in order to just get back on track in life because we allow that to reroute us and it throws us for a loop and we don't show up at work the same. We don't show up at school the same. We don't show up in our family the same.
I completely agree. We are very impulsive and sensitive creatures, whether we like to admit it or not. You're like, I'm not mad. I'm not doing this in spite of. No, it's a reaction. Everything has an equal
Yes.
and opposite reaction.
Right.
And you're probably like going down this route, but I just want to ask, what does anger look like in people who think they're fine? Because so often everybody says, I'm fine. It's not a big deal. This doesn't bother me. But no, it really does. Because it seems like in lieu of admitting our open and honest feelings, we just shut down, unplug, start ghosting people as a form of self sabotage.
A form of self soothing. Those are coping skills.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
maladaptive coping skills, albeit, but those are coping skills. And whether it's alcohol, partying with your friends, spending too much time in social media, just numbing out with food or video games or whatever it is, those are coping skills and they'll serve you until they don't. So, early experiences with stress and emotional expression, they really shape our attachment and our attraction to our partners. So think about it. As an example, someone who learned to suppress anger or keep the peace may be drawn to partners who externalize their emotion because now they're an expert at keeping the peace, right? And they get to live through their partner's externalization of their emotions, and it feels familiar, even if it's chaotic. It's similarly like there's people that will become accustomed to operating in high stress environments. In fact, that's what high achievers typically do. They become accustomed to operating in high stress environments. And oftentimes they're seeking this intensity in their relationship because it feels familiar, right? And calm feels foreign. It's not something that they're familiar with. And anger, avoidance, overfunction becomes a coping mechanism. These are coping skills that we put in place and they work until they don't. And not because people want drama, but because their nervous system recognizes this as normal. Does that resonate with you?
It does. I am definitely one of those people who silence is too loud, as I like to say. I'm not afraid of my own thoughts, but I can't stay with them too long. So I always have to keep busy, whether it's mentally, physically, emotionally. I have to be a fixer. I have to have 1,000 different projects. That way, when one finishes, there's not really a reprieve to let me sit in this solace too long.
Right.
But you guys listening or watching right now, if you're over on our YouTube channel, leave a comment or a like if you're addicted to the roller coaster, because that's what it compared to.
Mhm.
Is it's this huge ride where we're always so anxious, so nervous. We don't know what to do as we're going up the hill. We reach the hill, we have the state of bliss, we're all in control, and then we drop. People just don't know how to get off of that ride
Right.
in so many aspects of their life, not just
Excellent.
romantically.
Excellent observation. It's so real. Yeah. Stress and anger, they play a huge role in who we're drawn to. Recognizing that roller coaster, that may be why we choose that partner, is because we need that roller coaster to feel alive, right? Because a lot of people unconsciously choose familiarity over compatibility. Seriously. So if you grew up again around tension or emotional chaos, that roller coaster, right? Calm can feel boring. It can even feel unsafe. So when you're drawn to intensity, that high, that low, the roller coaster aspect, because your nervous system thinks, I know this. This I can handle. This is me. So anger and stress don't just show up in arguments, they shape our attraction, our tolerance, and even how long we stay in relationships that aren't working.
It's so interesting that you've taken this perspective because it fits into my narrative of we are very reactive. So you come off this bad relationship, you're overcorrecting because you're like, I
Mm.
want the complete opposite, but somehow you end up in the same spot is the biggest oxymoron I've ever come across. But also in this modern age, I love asking this question. I think we've also skewed away from the point of dating or how we used to date
Hmm.
because it's not really person to person for much of the relationship anymore because we all have busy work days and social lives. We communicate a lot via phone, text, social media, memes.
Hmm.
But before, attraction worked or you stayed with a partner because their pheromones suited you. They actually provided maybe a sense of security, whereas security looks a lot different than it does even hell, like 15 years ago.
Not even that long ago, if you think, COVID, pre COVID, like, it doesn't feel like it was. I mean, everything after that, nothing's ever been the same, period. But I mean, I don't know. It just feels like everything is changing so quickly, and we're constantly have this responsibility to constantly change with everything. And there's no ability for change management. There's no ability, there's no reprieve, and you have to just keep going is what it feels like, right? You don't need to subscribe to it, but a lot of people feel that it's imposed upon them.
No, they do. I have a large age group in my relative circle, and this is something that we've grown, the both men and women, we've grown to discuss is statistically, men flip when they're younger, they love dating older women or they're more attracted to older women. And when they get older, they're attracted to younger women. And I started to think maybe that is because we don't know how to change when it comes to dating. So we either want to keep the same mentality as when we first started dating, which is your teenage years. So you're always this 18 to 20 something year old person guy. And that works when you're dating, like when you're younger and you're with an older woman because they might already have had the family. So they don't want the commitment like you don't want the commitment. Or when it flips and you're ready for the commitment and to settle down for family, you want a younger girl because they're also like, ooh, I want to find a husband and settle down as well. So you just kind of meet in the middle. And it's wild to think that, but also you're different generation. So you're like, well, back in my day, you want the best of both worlds. And it's really hard to get that with how fast we're progressing on just all levels,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. There's a sense of subtle self sabotage there, the pattern and recognizing or even wanting to recognize. Let's consider the fact that some people don't want to know, some people don't want to change.
Ignorance is bliss.
can be until it's not.
And that's just the hardest part is we all say we want to be 1% better. 1% better isn't a huge change. It is change, but when you have so many different aspects of life, it seems like you could take forever to like literally every day you should be improving, but you don't see the progress. And in that time frame, it feels like so much is happening, so much is passing you by that once again, you're overstimulating yourself and that shutdown that leads to returning to the cycle of your nervous system reverting, isolating, self-sabotaging, going back into these unhealthy patterns. So I would love to ask you, what does a healthy boundary actually sound like word for word?
Interesting. What does a healthy boundary actually sound like? Well, in order to have healthy boundaries, we have to have a sense of self awareness. I don't have a very specific word for word answer for you. I think it's really complex and dynamic according to the relationship. But boundaries are available to the individual, deciding and being clear about who you are in that relationship. Because a lot of the time we come to a relationship looking for others to fulfill us. But when we have strong boundaries, it's because we've made the time to fulfill ourselves and the relationship, it just enhances our life experience. But boundaries are really difficult to impose when we don't know thyself, right? When we're not clear about who we are and how we choose to stand up or show up in a relationship.
That's kind of like the trick question is there is no correct or proper answer because boundaries are so situational.
Mhm.
They're so dependent, not just on you, but who you are pairing yourself with in this moment. Because the boundary you might have for your first love is not the same boundary you need to set or maybe even strengthen for your current or next partner.
Right,
You know,
because
it
the
could be something
dynamics.
completely different.
But we
And
have
that
a
goes back to
basic, right? We have a foundational set of boundaries like
mhm,
integrity, right? Maybe
yeah.
that's something that's important to you and that you value integrity. And so a boundary is that you will not impose a relationship in your life with a person who doesn't have integrity, right? Like that's a general, a standard, but most people don't even think about it that way, right? Like what does that mean in each individual? It doesn't have to relate to them. It has to relate to us and what we see as most valuable for us in the life that we want to lead. But you are correct. It does fluctuate. It's dynamic because one person that you get into a relationship with may have a higher level of integrity than the last one that you were with.
No, I completely agree, and it's true, and I would hope so. Because if you're still dating the same caliber of person that you were at 15
Right.
to 18 as you are in your mid-20s, your early 30s, and so on,
Mm-hmm.
it's a whole different conversation that we might have to have on a different episode. The way I always picture boundary is it's like a fortress.
Mm.
You know, you start with your land and they just keep building out, they compound on each other. So you shouldn't have to keep implementing your fundamental set. Those should be something that are so ingrained now because they're part of your four corners that let's focus, let's work on something a little higher up, a little more complex. They just get a little more niche as you go, swapping out the parts for things that you actually take the time for because some of us are actually healing. You know, some people, like you said, they don't want to know, but some of us like to look the scary, quote unquote, broken parts in the face and address those.
I agree. And, I think that there has to be a conversation. I think we don't talk enough with each other. We're afraid to have combative or conflicting conversations. We're afraid to have those edgy conversations when we really like someone. And I think sometimes we're a little deep into the relationship, right? Like we've invested time in this relationship and now we don't want to necessarily, quote unquote, we think lose that time. We might give it another chance. We might say, oh, well, I don't really know. Was that, just them being tired? Was that just them being hung over? Was that just them being stressed? But those are the most important parts is when how someone treats you and how they behave under stress. That is the most valuable point that you can take from your relationship is how people treat you when they're under stress. What's your thought about that?
A lot of people don't realize this unless they spend a lot of time working with people. But the reason there's the phrase that we're no better than animals is because when we are confronted or backed into a corner, all the work that we do, all the shiny vocab and techniques that we have, they're great, but they go out the window. We all go back to fight, flight, or freeze.
Yes.
So that's why your fundamentals are so important because we want to work on those and have those so ingrained that you're not always freezing in the moment or you're not running away when things get difficult.
Uh-huh.
Because if you run away from every tough conversation, you'll never build anything of substance or value, in my opinion.
That's right. But if we don't have the skills to encounter those difficult conversations, we do run away from them because we don't want conflict. Who wants to have an argument every day? Absolutely no one, right? We're all looking for peace and validation and love and joy, which is why we get into relationships. But in essence, those conversations, those stress points, when you're paying attention to someone and you recognize stress points that aren't in alignment, right? They're reactions that aren't in alignment with you. You need to have those difficult conversations because this can't be an, oh, I forgive you once, twice, three times. We're not doing that anymore.
Sure.
Right? Because, like I said, these relationships that we're getting into take a toll and they can be dangerous to our future self, our sense of self worth, our sense of being,
Mhm.
how we see ourselves and how we show up as a person in our next relationship, right? How we grow and evolve. And if you have a condescending, belittling person that you're in a relationship because that you're in a relationship and that's how they handle stress, they become condescending, they roll their eyes, they are avoidant. You've got work to do with yourself so that you can leave that relationship and recognize what is it about me that allowed myself to not see that version of them, right? What red flags did I miss because I let something go once or twice and now it really is a problem and it affects your mental health. It affects your psychology and it doesn't just affect your thinking. You're ruminating on these things most of the time. The people that I'm working with will ruminate on things and they can't function and they can't focus, right? That affects your driving. That affects your sleep. That affects whether you eat too little or you eat too much.
Let me ask you one more
Bring it
question
on.
to kind of round things off. Because, like I said, we all want to do better. We all want to be better. We all want better for ourselves. And that's great. But we don't know how to start on the road. So just keeping it simple. For anybody who's listening who knows they're the problem, what's the first step to becoming a solution?
Knowledge. The simplest thing you can do is to educate yourself because I'm speaking from my personal experiences. Had I had the opportunity to educate myself in human behavior and not just success, not just career wise and making money, but education and understanding human beings and human nature, recognizing how to label what someone is doing, there is a significant difference. People will not stay in incompatible relationships the more educated they are. And whether you work with someone or you educate yourself, right? You take on that responsibility of educating yourself. Education is number one because you can't acknowledge it. You can't fix it. Or if you don't know what it is, you don't have a title for it. You don't understand it. And the simplest thing you can do is learn. Yes, we have a lot of information. Too much knowledge is not good either, right? Without action. And so I would say that in essence, the first thing you can do is find a reputable source of material and knowledge to help you gain a new perspective so that you can start to recognize where you're the problem, why it shows up that way, not make yourself wrong, but just so that you can make yourself better. Does that help?
It does so much because you're right. Options are amazing, but sometimes having too many options
Analysis
leaves
paralysis.
us dead in the
Yeah.
water. Yes. So it's great that you helped us to filter some of that out, these notions, these ideas out. So that way, when we actually are ready to take this first step, I mean, if you're already on the journey, you now know your next step. But if you're waiting to start, learning about you learning about your world is an amazing first step for me, a lot of people, hopefully anybody else you date, because we've all been to the grocery store, forgot our list. We don't want to be wandering around for hours with a basket full of things that don't make a meal. That's
Right?
all I'm saying.
Yes, but
Yeah,
sometimes you're just in a hurry, you're hungry, you don't take well enough care, your time management is poor. I mean, there are so many aspects to this, and that's exactly what we do, is we just take whatever we see and bring it in, and then not recognizing the consequences of that.
for sure. That's something we are categorically awful at is not realizing, recognizing, or accepting
Yeah.
consequence. But like I said, I'm not pointing
No.
any fingers unless you're listening, unless you're watching, then I am pointing fingers. But that's just who we are. Like I said, that's one of the things we really need to work on if you're serious about building
Mhm. I agree, and
a business or relationship,
exactly.
you know?
It's so valuable because your greatest investment is yourself. It truly is. I know it sounds so cliche, but that's it, period. Your business will never grow more than you do. Your career won't grow more than you do. Your relationships, personal, won't grow more than you do. If you're in a relationship with someone and you invest in yourself, and
I can't care about you more than
I
you
know
do.
it's so good, it's true.
That's what I tell my patients. That's what I tell my clients. It's so true. I love this. I was like, not every idea has to be super
No.
complex. People will use so many other words, and I was like, just keep it simple, stupid.
I can't care for you.
I can't
Yeah.
care about you more
Yeah,
than you do.
I can't want it more for you than you do. It doesn't work that way. Yeah, you're just dragging
Listen,
them
I
along.
can't drag you over the finish line, right? I was
Yes.
like, you got to get there. I'll be there waiting
Yeah.
for you. I'll be right beside you, but you have to take the step
And
to start the race
that
and finish it.
happens so often when that's how couples grow apart. One doesn't wanna do the work, the other one wants to keep growing.
Mhm.
That's what happens. People grow apart.
Well, I think today, short and sweet, I love the new perspective that you've brought to this. You did an amazing job making it
Thank you.
tangible, which is also another reason we're scared to start things is because it's too big of a bite. They don't know where to come
Feels
in at.
overwhelming.
You made that bite size for everybody today. So I know everybody listening is wondering how they can connect with you. What's next? What does the second step look
Sure.
like? So how can
So
they
if you
find you?
want, check if someone's your vibe, right? You check them out on social media. And I have an Instagram that you can check out. It's thesammygroup.com. And SAMMY is the acronym for Stress Anger Management Institute. So it's TheSamigroup. And that's the website as well if you're interested in learning more about what I do and what I offer, but in our programs. But you can also, I shared a link that you can share with your listeners to see, it's a little assessment that gives you a perspective on whether or not your relationship is burning you out and making you sick, possibly. We look at relationships as things that are supposed to enhance us, but sometimes they end up taking away and they make things worse. So we want to get a good understanding of where we are in our relationships, what we're allowing, things we need to change. And if your listeners want to use that, that's fabulous. We would love to share that experience with them.
Well, thank you so much again, like I said, for making time for
Hey,
us
thank
today,
you.
for not just redefining or breaking down a couple of my walls, but educating everybody who's listening on the impact that stress or our old habits can really have on progressing in our future. So, guys, make sure when you're done listening to this that you click the link down below and you head on over to the Sammy group on social media. We'll list all the links or the
Yeah,
website and work on getting that stress in control because you can't be the CEO of your own life if you're not really good at managing people, yourself included.
included. Exactly. This was fun. Thank you so much, Joshua. This was delightful.
Thank you. I will see all you amazing bachelors, bachelorettes, and partner people next week for an all new episode of the Not So Bad Bachelor Pad. See you guys.